Damon West, it's good to have you here with us.
Father Leonard, great to be here.
It's such a pleasure that, your presence here. You know, you're a man who has such a powerful and inspirational story. There you are, you know, in your college years, having everything a young man would want. Graduating, being successful, and then losing it all and ending up in prison. And then now, you're out speaking, sharing God's love to people in prison and to college students and college athletes. Tell us about your story, about your journey, how God takes you from one place to another.
It's been a remarkable journey. You know, it goes back, I'm a cradle Catholic. I was born into a wonderful, loving Catholic home. I got an older brother named Brandon, younger brother named Grayson. My father is named Bob. My mother is named Jeannie. My mother had this strong devotion to the Blessed Mother growing up. I mean, I remember whenever we would be stuck at a rain out at a baseball game or something like that, and we'd be in our car, and she had one of these little finger rosaries. You remember finger rosaries? She had one on the little gear, on the little turn signal thing when they were real small. She'd pull it off, and we'd say the rosary. So she's always been into that. And she had these little prayer plaques and crucifixes all over the house. She couldn't escape God in this woman's home, right? So, but you know, not every family's perfect, and nobody's family's perfect. And we had our own problems. In '85, I was 9 years old, and I came out and told my parents my babysitter had been molesting me. And it's childhood sexual abuse in the '80s. They didn't know as much about it back then as they know now, but my parents loved me. They sent me to counseling, went and talked to the family priest. We prayed about it. We prayed a lot. But something inside that little 9-year-old boy went to a really dark place. And by the time I was 10, I started getting into my dad's beer in the fridge. I started sneaking drinks at my friends' houses whose parents had liquor cabinets. I started smoking cigarettes. By the time I'm 12, I'm smoking pot. So I'm putting chemicals into my body to change the way I feel. I'm in recovery today. And so I know that being in recovery, I look back on this is what's called an activating event in life, because I have the disease of addiction, but this activated it. So I'm an addict in my early stages of my disease, but I don't know that yet. Man, I'm so far away from even having a realization of that kind of thing. But I'm a really good athlete, Father, and so I get a lot of breaks cut to me in life. This is Texas, too, man. Texas high school football is big. You've seen the stories. You've seen the Friday Night Lights. Big stadiums. I mean, those stadiums are like cathedrals, and the players are like gods. And so, and I could throw a football really well. And so I got a lot of breaks cut to me in life because of that. I was a 3-year starter on my high school team. And a lot of my behavior, a lot of my character issues got pushed to the side because, hey, Damon's a really good athlete. And I went off to college. I got a scholarship to play football at the University of North Texas. And when I got there, the wheels kind of came off the wagon. I was an altar boy growing up. I was in church every Sunday. My mom made sure we were in church every Sunday. So from 7 to 18, I never missed a mass. When I got to college, I went to church 5 times. Those are holidays. They don't really even count, do they? I don't
Christmas, Easter, and all that.
Yeah, exactly. But that was my life. I quit focusing on the things that were important because that safety net wasn't around me anymore to help push me there. And I went after the things that I wanted to party all the time. I was very serious about football, too. All I wanted to be was a starting quarterback, and I got to be that. And eventually I got hurt. I got hurt against Texas A&M in '96, and I didn't have a plan B or a plan C. And I got to a fork in the road, and I made all the wrong choices. I started putting in hardcore drugs to change the way I felt: cocaine, ecstasy, pills, you name it. Doing it on party all the time. Somehow, by the grace of God, I graduate from college, go off to Washington, work in Congress. I work for a guy running for president. Then I get a job working on Wall Street for one of the biggest Wall Street banks in the world, UBS. And I'm trained to be a stockbroker. And one day at work, this guy introduces me to methamphetamine. I'm dragging around at work. He says, come on down to the parking garage and try this. Father, I took one hit of that drug, and I was up for 4 days, and I was instantly hooked. And I gave away everything, man. I couldn't give it away fast enough. My job, my home, my savings, my car, my family, my tethering to God, my sanity, the life of an addict. Went from working on Wall Street to living on the streets of Dallas. And so there I am. I fall in with a bunch of other meth heads, and we start breaking into storage units, start breaking into cars to feed our insatiable meth habits, and eventually we start breaking into homes. And you know, we did a lot of burglars. I hurt a lot of people by doing the burglars. I have a lot of victims out there, and there's no way to minimize the amount of pain and hurt and suffering and loss that I caused these people, because I didn't just take these people's property. Man, I took their sense of security. I took their memories. I mean, there's things that they'll never get back, but their sense of security, I don't know if they ever get that back. You know, there's people going home in Dallas right now, putting their key in the door, thinking, man, Damon West, the reason why I locked my door, you know? But after about 3 years of this, on July 30th, 2008, a Dallas SWAT team came in and scooped me up. And I always tell people that wasn't just the day I was arrested. That was the day I was rescued.
Oh,
God got me out of a situation I couldn't get myself out of. There was no way I was leaving that thing alive. And so I'm in county jail. And, you know, for the first time in years, I'm going to be sober. And the only thought I have going through my head is how am I going to get my dope while I'm in here? And eventually I call home. And my mom tells me on the phone call, she's like, baby, you know, you're now a captive audience to God, and you better start listening. There's nothing we can do for you anymore. Right. She said, do you remember that prayer plaque that I had on your wall as a kid growing up? And Father, I'm coming off this meth. I've been on meth for years, and I can't think straight. Right. I was like, no, Mom, I don't. She said, baby, it was footprints in the sand. Do you remember the story of footprints in the sand? And, you know, through the tears, I told my mom, no, I don't. And so she patiently and lovingly, like a mother, retold me the story of footprints in the sand about a guy walking on the beach with Jesus. And, you know, every time something good happens in this guy's life, they're watching a video in the sky. And every time something good happens, there's two sets of footprints walking side by side. But when there's something bad, when there's pain, hurt, suffering, loss, when he loses his football career, it's one set of footprints. And she said, the guy got so upset with Jesus, and he said, hey, you know, God, what's up, man? Every time something good happens to me, you're there with me. But when something bad happens, you abandon me. She said, that's when God said, Damon, you fool. Every time you saw one set of footprints, I didn't abandon you. I carried you. And so my mom kept drilling that into me, you know. In county jail, I was there for 10 months, and all I could think about in that 10 months is I can't wait to get probation to get out of here and get high again. But at the end of 10 months, a jury of my peers sat there after 6 days of trial and sentenced me to 65 years in prison. Oh, wow. 65 years, Father. That's a life sentence in Texas. Right. And that was rock bottom, you know. And rock bottom can be a good foundation to build a life on if you're receptive to it. But that's really where I was stripped of everything. And I'm getting ready to go in the Texas prison system, and this inmate in there named Mr. Jackson gave me the coffee bean analogy, which I think y'all played earlier. And that coffee bean analogy really stuck with me. And it was one of the tools I took with me into that prison environment. And prison is where I changed.
Well, this is amazing. And we're going to take a break right now. But after the break, we're going to speak about how you had this experience and encounter with Jesus Christ in prison. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what you're doing now.
Absolutely.
Now back to our interview with Damon West.
Okay, so yeah, here you are now on your way to prison. Tell us what happened, what's going on here, and how you managed to find Christ there.
Oh man, so I know from talking to Mr. Jackson what to expect from prison, that, hey, he's like, man, you're going to get into a lot of fights in here. You're not going to get into I made my parents a promise. My parents promised me, Damon, come back as the man we raised. You know, no tattoos, and don't get into one of these white hate groups because you're scared because you're a minority in there. And so I tell Mr. Jackson, I tell everybody on my pod in county jail, I've made this promise, and then everybody laughs at me. But Mr. Jackson takes me serious, and he says, listen, if you're going to do that, you need to understand that you're going to get in a lot of fights, and you're not going to win all your fights. He said, he gave me this point. He said, you don't have to win all your fights in life, but you do have to fight all your fights. He said, don't ever turn down a fight. And that's a lesson in life, Father.
Yeah, that's what you've taken and you're using now.
Right, because, I mean, I've learned more about myself from my losses than I ever did from my wins. When was the last time you really inspected a win? But when you get your butt handed to you, you really inspect
humbled.
that. You're
That's
humbled.
right.
That's right. You're broken out. Like I said, rock bottom's a good foundation to grow on. So here I am going into prison with this understanding there's going to be a lot of violence, but man, I had no clue, even with what he told me. It was extremely violent when I got there. And first, because prison's all about race.
Yeah.
So first, all the white gangs want to get a crack at you. So the Aryan Brotherhood, the Aryan Circle, the White Knights of the Woods. I'm fighting all these guys off. It takes a couple weeks. And then after that, like Mr. Jackson told me, he said, after you get done with the white gangs, the black gangs are going to come after you, because the white gangs are going to send them. Crips, the Bloods, Gangster Disciples, Mandingo Warriors. So I'm fighting all these guys. And Father, I'm so terrified. Every time I leave that cell, someone yells out, West, I want to look at you in the shower. And there's nothing crazy about what they're saying. I want to look at you in the shower means we're going to box in that shower right now, because people fight in the shower in prison. There's no guards back there. There's no cameras, and blood cleans up really easily out of there. And so I'm doing that. I'm about 6 weeks into prison, man. And I go down to the prison chapel, and this is one place that I've tried to get to as much as I can, but I'm so terrified to leave my cell, I just don't go that much. And I go there and I find this lady named Miss D Doucette, this little old Catholic lady down there. And there's a big Catholic community at this prison. It's one of the biggest in Texas. I just blessed to end up at that prison. And I go in there and I ask Miss D if we can talk and close the door. And I tell her, Miss D, I can't do this anymore. I can't do this 65 years. I'm really thinking about killing myself. And she talks to me about my Catholic faith. She's Catholic too. And she says, look, you got to do like your mom said, get on God's back. And she said, baby, do you have a rosary? And I said, no, Miss D, I don't. They took it from me when I came from county jail, because you can't bring anything into prison with you. And so she gave me this prison rose. This is my rosary from prison still, Father.
Okay.
I carry this thing with me everywhere
Cool.
I go, and
Yeah.
like people since I've been out have given me all these ornamental and nice rosaries, but I dance with who brung me, man. This is the one that Miss D gave me, and she prayed a rosary with me right there on the spot, and she said, pray one of these every day for me. Promise that you'll pray it and you'll talk to the Blessed Mother and ask the Blessed Mother to intercede for you. And I did, and she put me in all the Catholic classes I could get into at that chapel. They have a lot of Catholic groups to get into. Brotherhood of St. Dismas was one of the ones I really, do you know who St. Dismas is? The good thief. But I immediately identified with this because here I am, I'm a thief, and I'm a convicted thief, but I'm not a bad guy. I made a lot of mistakes and I was on drugs, but I'm not a bad guy, and I just want to be loved again. I want to be like that prodigal son and come home to something. So I start getting down in that chapel as much as I can. And then eventually, one of the chaplains in there gets me into what's called the Acts retreat. They called them Acts at the time. Now they're called the St. Colby Ministry because St. Colby is the patron saint of prisoners. And I go in there, and it's a 4-day retreat. And these men from the outside, Father, that came in, men like Joe Tatoris, the guy that's a buddy of mine now that goes to the retreats with me. But Joe and these guys come in, and they leave their homes, their families, their jobs, their lives for 4 days to come spend time with the incarcerated, the sinners, the menace. Nobody wants to be around us prisoners, you know? And they loved on us. They hugged us. And I saw every man in there, the biggest, baddest guys in the joint, after 4 days in that retreat, were crying like babies, man. You saw the Holy Spirit work that room, and there was something in there. And that's when I learned about servant leadership. The secret to life, Father, is serving others and being humble.
That's right.
And that's what I learned about that from those men. And that servant leadership was something I could take and grow on. And I got into recovery in prison. Recovery. I'm an addict. If I don't have a program of recovery, I don't have anything.
And so God does this powerful work in your life in the prison. You're converting, you're transforming in there. How long were you there actually?
Okay, I was in prison for 7 years and 3 months.
And then came the time where you could be released and the probation?
Yeah, so they came November 16th, 2015.
Yeah.
2 years ago today.
So it's being pre-recorded today.
Yeah, so
but praise the Lord.
2 years ago, they came by and said, hey, look, we're going to give you one shot. We're going to let you go. But if you come back, we're going to have you finish off this sentence for us. So they came back and told me, you're on parole till 2073. Go out there and don't make any more mistakes and be the best person you can be. And so now I've got this opportunity in front of me.
And you've become a servant leader. And tell us about your servanthood right now and how you're showing leadership out, ministering to college students and college athletes. And
oh man, well, the first thing was getting this job at Provost Humphrey Law Firm. I had to have a foundation to build on, and they opened the door. They gave me a shot. I never hired a felon, and from that, this firm has allowed me to go all over the country to all these speaking engagements. I go to high schools, churches, youth groups. Back at home in the diocese in Beaumont where I am, they let me go to talk to all the youth groups. I spend most of my Wednesdays doing it last year. I go to the church conventions and talk to them. College football teams all over the country. I was just at University of Alabama in August talking to their football team because I was a college football player too, and I have this unique currency to spend with everybody. But it's not just so much the warning about the dangers of drugs and addiction and the consequences of bad decisions. It's the message of hope, Father. It's the message of hope that if I could build a life inside of that environment, or as Coach Davos Winnie said, if you can bloom where you're planted. You know, if I could bloom where I was planted in there, then that's got to give people hope. You know, hope that whatever problem you're facing, whatever you're going through, hey, if God could work that in Damon West's life, God can work it in your life too.
Amen.
And that's the message I try to bring to people. And I'm always trying to find that one kid in the crowd, that one kid that you stop something in its tracks from ever happening.
So, you know, the retreat you had in the prison changed your life forever. And now you're giving back. You're doing the same thing. Tell us about what you're doing in the prisons now.
All the things I do in life, Father, the colleges, the high schools, the churches, the youth groups, they're great. I love doing it. I love being able to give back and doing God's work. But the prison, man, that's the best thing I have going. I get to go into prisons now. I get to go into my old prison with this same St. Colby group and bring those retreats to inmates like men used to bring it to me. Servant leadership. I mean, here it is. God, we've come full circle now. The guy that was going through the retreat is now the guy bringing the retreat to other people. And in a prison environment, man, I've got a currency to spend with these guys. I've got street cred when I go into a prison, any prison in America, because those guys can't look at me and say, well, that guy's never done a hard time. I have a life sentence. Or he never did time in a hard unit, one of the hardest units in Texas, you know? But I get to go back to these prisons now and bring a message of hope. And every one of these guys, I mean, I get 100% participation out of this deal. These guys will all come up and say, Damon, you bring us hope. And I tell them, that's great. But if you want what I've got, you got to start today. You got to turn your life over to Jesus Christ. You've got to change what you're doing in here. You got to start those habits today. You've got to become a servant leader inside this place. And because that's what I had to do. But the great thing about it is, especially in the prison, last weekend, I was inside my old prison where I did my time with the Colby Retreat. And those guys all know that I'm not just talking something. I walk the walk because they remember, man, Damon went out and helped other people. Because the secret to life is serving others and being humble. You help other people reach their goals in life. And when you're really helping other people and you're doing it for nothing but the good of God, then you're really living, you know, because you've got to work. I tell these guys, you got to work out 3 areas every day in this prison. It's going to be the hardest thing in the world, spiritually, mentally, physically. You know, you are what you eat. That's not just with food, but what are you feeding yourself spiritually? Do you tap into God? Do you feed yourself spiritually at all? What kind of books are you reading? What kind of videos you watch? What kind of TV do you watch in the day room?
What kind of friends?
What kind of friends do you hang around? You show me who you hang out with, I'll tell you who you are. Most people in life want to be led, Father. That's a fact. And in the absence of good leadership, they'll take bad leadership. A thirsty man in the desert will drink the sand when he sees a mirage, and it'll kill him.
Well, hey, this is a powerful, wonderful story, Damon. Thank you for coming here and sharing it with us. You know, that's exactly what you did. I know that this is going to be powerful and effective to all our viewers, all our watchers. You know, they know for certain now that all things are possible with God, and you're a living proof of it. You're a walking miracle. Thanks be to God, and thanks for what you're doing in the church.
I'm humble to be here. Thank you very much.
God bless you, man.
Thank you very much.